I have a friend, and he's very conscientious. That's not an Italian word, that's an English word. Conscientious. And he wants to help people, and he doesn't want them to be burdened. And he doesn't always ask people to do things because he doesn't want them to be overloaded. But in the process, he gets overloaded, and in the end, he doesn't always manage to get things completed. Not because he's bad or because he's not ambitious or power. He's not looking for power. He genuinely has a desperate desire to do well, to do everything very well, and to share other people's burdens on himself. So he doesn't want other people to be burdened, but in the process he takes on too many things himself, and as a result, some things don't quite happen. And in the end, he burns himself out. He burns himself out, and he gets people's backs up because they haven't got what they wanted out of what he was doing. So he's a good person. He's not power hungry or anything like that. But because of his conscientiousness and his desire to make sure everything is done, sometimes things don't happen. And this is what Moses was like. Moses was good. He wasn't power hungry. If you remember, if we look back, and we've gone through a lot of Exodus now, if we look back at when Moses was called, when the burning bush was burning, and Moses was called by God to take the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses wasn't power hungry, was he? He wasn't clinging to do the job, was he? He was running away, wasn't he? He said, God, you've got the wrong man. I'm not the man. I'm not the one to do this. So Moses wasn't somebody who was particularly ambitious. But when he saw that God had called him, he really wanted to do a good job. And he did a good job, didn't he? I mean, it's not an easy job, he did. He did a very good job. And at this stage in his life, after all that's happened, we see a very mature Moses. A Moses that isn't trying to shirk his responsibilities. When we go back to Exodus chapter 3, we've got a younger Moses who doesn't want responsibility. I don't know if you remember, but God says to him, Moses, go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. Moses doesn't want that responsibility. And he says all kinds of excuses. I can't speak properly, God. I'm not good at that sort of thing. Can't you ask somebody else? This is a very different Moses, isn't it? This is a Moses who is desperate to do what God has asked him to do. And he's so desperate to do what God asked him to do that he's gone to the other extreme. He's gone far from the Moses who didn't want responsibility to the Moses on the other extreme who is taking everything onto himself for a very good motive. He's now accepted his calling and he doesn't want to be shirking his responsibilities. He's accepted the call of God on his life. He's accepted that God has called him to lead the people of Israel. And so not only has he accepted that, but he's gone to the other extreme and he's not delegating anything. And so his father-in-law says to him, what are you doing? There's people queuing up all day. It's like the anagraphy on Lungo Tevere. There's people queuing up from, it says, people were queuing from morning to night. So Moses, although his motive is good, although his heart is good, people are becoming, they're all day waiting to see Moses because he's the only person. And his father-in-law, who has seen a thing or two in his life, says, young man, well, he's not young now. Moses is not young. I don't know how old he is, but he's not young. His father-in-law says to him, Moses, don't do this. 1, you'll kill yourself. You'll kill yourself. 2, you'll make these people annoyed. They won't thank you for it, Moses. They won't thank you because they're waiting all day to see you. So his father-in-law says to him, I'm going to give you some advice. I'm going to give you some advice. And God will help you to do it. So his father-in-law says to him, he says several things. One of them, he says, teach people what you do. If you go in the Hebrew, it says, explain to the people what you do, so that they know what you do. Keep the complicated stuff, Moses. You're still going to have a job, Moses. The complicated stuff, you're still going to have to deal with. But you need to tell people how to do what you do. Explain to them what's involved. Tell them the law. Tell them how they should interpret it. Explain to them what it is you do so that they can do it. Then he says this. He says, establish a system. Establish a system. Get some people who can do it. People not only who are capable, but have the same heart as you. Moses was chosen because he had this deep heart to help others. God chose Moses because of his heart, his wanting to do the right thing. And Moses now, God says to him, choose people who have the same heart as you, who want to serve, who want to help. Find people like that. Make sure that they have that heart, that they're devoted to God. Find people who love God, who are devoted to God, people who will be honest. It says that they won't accept bribes, so it's very clear Moses should choose very moral people, people who love the Lord, and train them. And then it says something very interesting. It says to be permanent leaders. Now, if we look at the Hebrew, it says establish them in leadership. So Jethro is saying to Moses, don't just give people a basic job. Tell them what you do so that they understand it backwards, that they know how to do everything, and then give them authority. Give them an office. Don't keep yourself as the conduit, right? This word means establish them in positions of authority, so that they have in their own right an authoritative role to do the work. So establish them in leadership. Now, you see, that doesn't just mean Moses has to keep answering things every day. Moses just does the stuff that's really hard, okay? He doesn't get involved in every single thing. He's not the conduit for everything that happens. He has told them what they need to do, established them, trained them, given them clear, permanent roles. So people identify them as the go-to person. So it's not that Moses has given them a little bit of leadership, but people are still coming to him and then he refers them. No, they are given a role, an established role, so that people know they go to such and such if it's the thousands, such and such if it's the hundreds, such and such if it's the tens. Each level has a person who is recognized as a person in leadership. So that means that not everything comes to Moses' door. It goes to those people unless it's very complicated, and then they refer it to Moses. It's not that people still come to Moses and then he gives them, you must phone such and such. No, people know, I go to this person. And then that person says, I can't handle this. This is way above my pay grade. Moses, and then it goes to Moses. And Jethro did this because if he hadn't done this, the whole thing would have collapsed. The whole thing would have collapsed. Any organisation that doesn't have these kind of systems in place has no permanent future. Because Moses, if he didn't have grey hair, he would have done quickly. My friend who I was talking about, he went grey because he was trying desperately to help so many people that he went grey. My first job in ministry in Sheffield had 5 churches, and there was the previous minister was a very gifted man. He could do accounts, he could do property, he could, whatever you name it, he knew it. He used to be a bank manager, he'd become a minister, and then I came in my 20s, and I didn't know how to be a bank manager. I didn't know anything about property, never owned a property. I didn't know any of those things. And all the people were looking at me and saying, Daniel, Reverend Daniel, you need to sign this property thing because the other minister knew how to do it, so you should know how to do it. Daniel, we've got no treasurer. Now, there was a treasurer for each church, but then there was a treasurer overseeing those 5 churches. And they didn't have 3 of those treasurers. 3 of those treasurers were not there. And they said, Daniel, the other minister knew how to do it, so you can do it. And I said to them, look, if I do that, we'll end up in prison, all of us. I said, because I don't know how to count very well, and it won't be good. So I said, look, who knows how to do this? And they said, we don't know. I said, right, I will visit everybody in all of our churches and find out what their gifts are, and I will make a database, and I will find out what everybody did in their working lives, and sooner or later we will find someone. And lo and behold, a few cups of tea and bourbon biscuits later, we had a list of everybody, and some people were shy. They'd worked in banks, but they were shy, and they didn't want to come forward. Some people who'd stopped coming to church saw me on their doorstep, and they weren't even prepared with the bourbon biscuits. And I was there on their doorstep. Hello, how are you? Oh God, the minister's come. What are we going to do? And then they came back to church because when they felt they were needed, they came back to church. And I didn't have a stroke. We did find 3 treasurers. We found a property person, and we managed to get it all organised so that none of us ended up in prison. It was very good. It was a mercy of God. There was a temptation at the beginning, a very dangerous temptation for me, to try and become like my predecessor. Very dangerous, because he could do it, because he was a bank manager. And fair enough. He could do it. But I knew that it would be a disaster if I tried to do it. And luckily, I resisted the temptation to become the saviour of the situation. And my hair is still brown. For now. So, these things are very important. In the circuit where I worked, there was another treasurer. And he knew and was a good man. He knew how everything worked. Suddenly, he died. We didn't know where anything was. We had to get lawyers to help us. Everything suddenly happened. He was a good man. He was such a good man that he didn't worry anybody with anything. And then suddenly, it was really a difficult situation. And I thought, right, what are you teaching me, Lord, through all of this? 1, Daniel, don't go into bank management. Don't do that, Daniel. It's not your calling. That's the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is the gifts we have complement each other. And we need to always be working together. Any organisation that does that flourishes. Because people, when they're using their God-given gifts, when you're doing what you're born to do, you wake up with a skip, don't you? You wake up, you leap out of bed, don't you? When you're doing a job you love, or even if you're not doing a job you love, but in church you're given the chance to do something you love, it gives you a meaning, doesn't it? Because God has put in each of us a calling. Every one of us has a calling. Sometimes we find our working lives don't allow us to use that gift. Sometimes we find ourselves in other countries, don't we? And in those other countries, the language is different, and we may not find in that country we're able to use our gifts like we could if we were using our own language. But sometimes within the church, we can still find fulfillment to use our gifts. So maybe we worked, before we left our countries to come to Italy, maybe we worked in a bank, or maybe we worked in a theatre, or maybe we worked in a school. And then when we came to Italy, because of the language, because they didn't recognise this document or this certificate, I tell you, at the anagraphy on whatever day it was, we had some fun with my wedding certificate. That's from Ghana, but you're not from Ghana. I said, yes, no, it's true, I'm not from Ghana. Look at me, no, I'm not. But my wedding certificate's from Ghana because my wife's from Ghana. Are you sure she's from Ghana? I said, yeah, I'm very sure she's from Ghana. She cooks all sorts of interesting fish that smell very interesting and it nearly kills me. She's from Ghana. So, sometimes you've got certificates. You might have a master's degree. But when you come to another country, they don't recognise it because of language, because you haven't found the right apostle. Is it apostle? You've got to have a stamp for documents, haven't you? I call them St. Paul's. In Italy, if you've got a document, it doesn't matter if it's a birth certificate, unless it's got the Apostle Paul's stamp on with his signature, they don't accept it. It took me a year to get an apostle on the children's birth certificates in Milan. And then we had to go to the court and get them translated with another apostle. I think that was Peter. And when they got Peter and Paul, the Comune gave us residency in Milan. So, you might have a certificate from Ghana or from the Philippines or from England. And here, you present it, and it's not in Italian, so they think, oh, I don't understand what that is. It hasn't got Paul and Peter on. So, you may have done something very important in your country, but when you came here, you struggled to have an opportunity professionally. But the church, Peter and Paul don't get looked for here. If you say to me, I used to do this. In the Philippines, I was doing this. Or in Ghana, I was doing this. And I want to use these gifts. I'm not going to ask you for a court-sworn translation of your documents, okay? I'm not going to ask you to go to Lepante and queue up all day for a sworn translation of your certificates. Some people would, but I will not. If you say to me, I really want to use this gift in church, I might not be able to help you professionally, but in church, we are a place where our gifts for the glory of God should be used. That is what God has given us. If you don't use your gifts, something dies inside of you. If you don't use your gifts, something inside you doesn't add up. You know where most of the gifts, the richest places in the world, do you know where the richest place of talents is? The graveyard. So many people don't use their time on earth to use their gifts. They meet obstacles professionally. Maybe they haven't got Apostle Peter and Paul on them, or I don't know. Or maybe things just are difficult professionally. But the church is a place, and should be a place, where you fly, where you spread your wings and fly. I joined the church because there was a teacher doing a youth group. And I didn't believe anything then. He said, Daniel and John, my friend, we were always playing music at the pubs, singing like karaoke. And he said, you come and play the music at this youth group. And we flicked a coin, because we said, should we do it or not? We flicked a coin, we said, heads we'll do it, tails we won't. That's how prayerful we were. Thank God it came up, I can't remember, but it said we should go. And we start, because he asked us to do something. He asked us, and we felt valued by somebody in the church. And then because we felt valued, I started going to the other youth group. I didn't believe in God, but I started to get involved in things. And then, because I was involved in things, I heard the message. Brothers and sisters, I didn't drink enough coffee this morning, so I've rambled a bit. But the point is this: we all must use our gifts. Don't let me handle finance, ever, right? If I try and handle finance, call the police, right? You got it? What is the number? The Carbonare. No, that's pizza, isn't it? Call them. If I try and call them. We are all here to use what God has put in us. All of us. Some of us will do some things at one level, some of us at another level, and we'll all find, but we must all use our gifts, because when we do, we will all flourish. We will all be blessed, and we will all know that magical feeling, and you don't need coffee on those mornings, where you leap out of bed, skipping, and saying, yes, I'm doing what God put me on this earth to do. Even if professionally you haven't got Marco de Bolo and Marco Polo and Peter and Paul, in this church, it is a place I want you to use your gifts. Hallelujah. Amen. Let us pray.